Hello, I'm Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and in this episode, I want to tackle the idea of what self-help is and what self-help isn't. Because I think there's a lot of myths about self-help, self-improvement, whatever you want to call it, that puts people down the wrong path, okay? And it does them a disservice, right? But before I fully get into it, I would like to take the opportunity to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already. That way you get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly does mean a lot to me, as I hope it does to you. So, let's get into this. I think, number one, there's this idea that if you go to therapy, you work on yourself and so forth, that life somehow becomes easier. And that's just not true. Regardless of how enlightened or unenlightened you may be, right, if that is even quantifiable, the fact of the matter remains is that life is still life and there will be obstacles presented in your way. But rather than see these obstacles and challenges as woe is me and life is unfair, what you end up really doing is figuring out how to better deal with them in the moment, right? And, we all get better and better at these things the more we become present. But still, sometimes, an issue that arises, it can take us, a week or more to solve. But whereas before, something might have been nagging at you for a week, a month, maybe even longer, now it becomes much more easier to process and deal with, right? So that's what this is all about. It's not eliminating the issues themselves. It's having a better way to cope and handle when those things arise. That is really the crux of what we're talking about. And if you can get your head around that, it becomes manageable. Because I think there's a lot of times this knee-jerk reaction of oh, well, I've been going to therapy for 2 to 3 years, let's say, and life just doesn't seem to be getting any easier. And that's the thing. Life doesn't get any easier necessarily. It's just how you handle those things, how you react to those things, that becomes the manageable side of it all, right? As that famous quote says, in life, I'm paraphrasing, life is basically 10% of what happens to us and 90% of how we react. So what we're working on is that 90% of how we react to those things, right? So that's the crux of what's truly self-help and self-improvement is really all about. Now, the other aspect of this that I see is that, part of our ability to grow is that we then, in essence, can take on more, and our ability to help others and be a force of good, let's say, in this world grows. And in many ways, that's why, seemingly the more development work you do on yourself, the more it seems like, oh wow, now all of a sudden problems keep coming towards you, and it's because, well, in some sort of weird cosmic force sort of way, you're showing the world that you have the capabilities to take on these challenges and offer your services, and so the world kind of gravitates towards that. Very fascinating in that way, but take that as a compliment. I mean, this quote I once heard, where being stressed is a sign of privilege. Sometimes, and now it's nuanced. I don't want to just say that it's an all-encompassing term, but that's for another day, right? There is that idea, though, in the purest way, that when people look to you for help, or whatever else, they come to you, and it's because, they feel that you can offer them something, right? And I think sometimes the negative aspect of self-help is that we use it as an excuse to bypass and shut off the rest of the world, right? And we use terms like, I'm putting up my boundaries, or X, Y, and Z. And listen, I'm not saying that people shouldn't put up boundaries and that they shouldn't say no. I think these are all part of it, but don't let it become a negation of the negation. And what that means is that most people think like the opposite of love is hate, right? And no, yes, that is the opposite, but it's not the worst thing, right? The worst thing is hate disguised as love, right? And so in that same way, as through the self-help movement and so forth, don't let yourself just adopt these things and then use them as an excuse to shut off the world and essentially be an asshole, right? That's kind of a crux of this, Part of doing this work is so that way we can be better for ourselves and therefore we can be better within the world. And yes, sometimes that means stepping away and really having to nurture ourselves. But I think in your heart of hearts, you know the difference between the two. And certainly that's the goal of any sort of spiritual awakening. That's the goal to get to, right? Or any practice work that you may be doing on yourself, right? So these are the two big things that I would like you to consider and think about as you continue in your pursuit of all of this, right? Call it happiness, call it enlightenment, call it an awakening, whatever it is that you want to term it. These are two big aspects that I would encourage you to consider. As always, if you have any questions or thoughts of your own, please comment down below or hit me up on social media at Svitek. I would love to hear from you. Likewise, if you appreciate what I do and think you might benefit directly from interaction with me, well, there's coaching, right? So that is linked to down in the description box. We can set up coaching sessions and I can help you that way. Or if you want to kind of just dip your toe in at first, well, there's my Patreon page, patreon.com/PhilSvitek. And there's various tiers of support that get you various rewards and interactions with me. Likewise, I also create stuff, whether it be books, movies, merchandise, and so forth. So that is all available as well. That's another way to support me and also get some cool stuff that way as well. And the benefit and why this is all symbiotic is because by supporting that stuff, it allows me to create more of that stuff, which then I learn and get to share the lessons right here with you for free, right? So it's cyclical in that way. Thank you so much. I appreciate you and hope to see you next time.